Hello there. We're in London today and we're in the Palace of Westminster, so that's the Houses of Parliament, and we're looking at a particularly old little corner of it, sort of often forgotten, I think. It's called the Jewel Tower. The reason that the Houses of Parliament are called the Palace of Westminster is before it was government, it was kingly business. And this little sort of castle-y bit to the left there, framing the view of Westminster Abbey, is where the jewels, the sort of crowny jewels, were kept. We're talking 1366, so we're talking Edward III. So, obviously, seriously long time ago. It hasn't been used for that kind of purpose for 600 years or so. It only had that role for a couple of hundred years. They eventually moved all the king's pretty things to somewhere a bit more modern and secure. And this moved on to being other kind of, officey, paperwork, filing-y kind of governmental stuff. I suspect, and I don't know this for a fact, that it was just built so strong because of its original purpose that it was too much bother to knock down. And when lots of the other stuff around here was cleared away, this was left. Now, I've drawn this view before. A couple of years ago, during the summer, I did a kind of line and wash urban sketch of exactly the same view. And it's always kind of fixed in my mind as one of those special little views. It's the way the Westminster Abbey towers are so perfectly framed in that little kind of slot between the two buildings. It's kind of, it stuck with me. And so when I was in the same area with the London plein air painters, I thought, well, let's just go back there and see how I've changed in those 2 years. I think treading back over old ground is an interesting thing to do. Not too often, you don't want to be repetitive, but it's interesting to see how you do things differently. I mean, I've painted Tower Bridge 3 or 4 times. This is the second time I've done this. There's a few other things that just by repetition, you just kind of, it's like the drumbeat of your creative life, isn't it? Something you see the rhythm slowly change. You're not necessarily aware of it yourself, but when you compare them side by side, you think, okay, this is how I'm moving forward. Moving sideways. You be the judge of that. The drawing the sketch we're doing today, I think of it as a sketch because I'm going to be using sketchily techniques, even though it's a painting. And what I mean by that, of course, is it's largely linear. It's going to be starting out with acrylic, and I'm going straight in there with a line. I'm not doing any measurements. I'm not doing any pencil guidelines. Frankly, I don't need to. I don't think I'm that bothered about the proportions. I trust myself enough. And what I really look for most is that sense of spontaneity. Now, this drawing I'm going to be doing is 3 hours long. And you can imagine that spontaneity in a 3-hour session like this can be difficult to maintain. Simply because, you just get caught up in the process of putting paint down in a very kind of orderly and considered way. And so things sometimes can end up feeling a bit staid and repetitive, within yourself because you just end up relying on the same techniques. So I think it's a really positive thing to go into a process like this with the goal as being a little bit of surprise and a little, to yourself and as much energy as possible. So I have a very, very clear game plan. And the game plan you see here, I really want the highlight to be the view of the Abbey. And I want it to feel kind of bright and distant. So I'm using blue because it has that sense of pushing back the image, so it pushes it back into the sky and makes it feel a bit ethereal. And I'm going to paint it sort of accurately but loosely. So there's enough there that you can see what it is, but there's a kind of shimmer to it, and that's intentional. This is about how I make the lines. I'm not using too small a brush, and I'm not being too finicky, too precise. I'm allowing those lines to kind of dance around a bit and blur and smear a little bit, just to give them that energy. And then the rest, once I got to this kind of point, although I do go back and redo those towers and multiple points just to bring a little bit of warmth back into them, from this moment onwards, it's all plain sailing. It's going to be fine. Because I'm with this painting group, there is a fixed amount of time. I do have to finish the painting within 3 hours. There is no extensions, So it's kind of a game you play with yourself and your friends to see what you can do in that time. And because I've done the the sort of outlining first, and then I've done the thing that matters most, which is the view of the Abbey. Now I'm doing everything else is kind of like filling in. I can make this as detailed or as loose as I choose to do in the time I have. So there's sort of a relaxing quality to that. If I was to start on one side of the painting sketch and go from one side to the other, then I might run out of time, and there might obviously be a sense of unfinished business within the painting piece, and I don't like unfinished business. I never take something sort of back home and try and finish it afterwards, even if sometimes I convince myself I might. I never really do, because it always seems too prissy and well, just not me. I want to get it done in the time I give myself, because that's all part of the personal challenge of it. I want to kind of measure myself by that stick, and just see where I can go. So that sense of knowing what you want to get from the painting you do, that sense of knowing how to win. That sounds a bit silly, doesn't it? It's a very London thing to say, but the idea of how to win at the painting as quickly as possible. So you're basically, from then on, you can cruise, you can just enjoy the decisions you make. And through this painting, I mean, up until this moment, everything was sort of predestined. I knew what I was going to do. I knew how it would sit on the paper. Obviously, I took a sheet of purple paper intentionally. That has a kind of a regal thing, but it also has that feeling of that connection to the warm blue. So all of this kind of was very much in my mind as being, this is how I was going to go about it. And from now on, I can play. I mean, there comes a point where I bring oranges and reds into the foreground in a kind of a joyous, experimental way. And that isn't predetermined. I don't know I'm going to do that. That's just me having some fun. Now let's talk about sunlight, because oh God, it's annoying you, isn't it? And I get so many complaints about videos where the sun is sort of inconveniently splashing across the picture frame like this. And as I set this up, there was one position which was the perfect position to get the view I wanted. So I'm in this position, the sun is kind of there. And I think to myself, I want you to see this, because to me, when I'm painting the painting here, I don't see this view. I don't see the sunlight. I don't see the shadows. I don't really see the movement. You'll see shadows coming in. You see that there? That's a person's head looking behind me, getting their head in the sunlight, casting a big kind of weird shadow over the top of the painting. I'm not seeing it, because when you're in that world of painting the image, you don't see the surface in that way. I'm just not zoning it out, I suppose, or it just isn't relevant to me. The sunlight and the shadow is not something that, not only does it not bother me, it's not really noticeable. And I think that's a really good measure of, a person's engagement in what they're doing. It's a bit like, I don't know, when you're... I often do analogies to do with running races or playing music or something. But imagine you're an athlete and you're running around a track. And while you're running around the track, all you can think about is your breathing and your rhythm and whatever else is going on. If somebody else is in the middle throwing a javelin, or somebody's cheering because they've just done a big triple jump, and you're completely unaware of it. Even though you're meters away from it, you're completely in your own world, focused on what you need to do. And that's how I feel about moments like this, where I'm just, nothing can really get in the way. Nothing gets in my head. When people talk to me, when people just, getting super excited to see what you're doing and want to chat about it, I'm just so clearly in the zone that I'm super polite, but I do give them the impression that nothing in the world is going to stop me, because I'm just going for it. And I think that's a good goal in life, to be so into it that the idea of anything getting in the way just seems, well, of course not. Nothing's going to get in the way. How could it? You're there, you're in the flow, you're in the zone. You're kind of connected to this piece in a way that feels embedded and inherent and beautiful. And you're very kind of it feels very zen. I don't want to get all weird about it, but you feel as one with that painting. It gives you a really beautiful connection. Now let's talk about yellow borders. This isn't a permanent thing. This is simply masking tape. I've put masking tape, which is about 30 millimeters wide, about 1.5 inches, around all 4 sides of this piece of paper because, well, for 2 reasons really. I was interested to see how it would change the way I thought about it, because I could paint to the line, and obviously at the end you remove the masking tape and you get kind of a paper border to it, which actually in the end I didn't care. It didn't matter to anything to me. And also I wanted to slightly reduce the paper size. I normally use slightly cut down A1 to fit on the board I conveniently carry in my bag. The whole thing's determined by how much I can carry, because I get a tube and a bus, so I have to be able to carry it conveniently. But I wanted just to bring it down an itsy bit, just like a few square millimeters, as it were, just to make the process easier. I believe in painting large because I believe in using the body to paint, as in the arm moves and the shoulders move and the head moves, and I find that important to my process. I don't like to feel what I would call tight, which means that I'm moving my hand or my fingers alone and just kind of moving in a very kind of itty-bitty way. That kind of annoys me and makes me feel, there's something distancing about it, something that makes me feel a bit unhappy about it. I'm much happier if I can engage kind of physically with the painting process, actively kind of moving and roaming around the canvas and standing up and sitting down, all that kind of stuff. I find that more interesting and more enlivening, a positive experience. And the third reason for using the masking tape, no one ever asks this, but the question of how do you get this stuff home would come up. Because I take the paper off the boards, I pack the boards down and put them in my bag, because it folds in 2 halves, and I roll the paper up, just hold it with a bulldog clip, like a big paper clip, chuck it in a big bag, like a rubbish bin bag, trash bag, and carry it home. It's just a roll of paper inside a bag. And as you can imagine, if you paint to the edges, as I always did until this moment, the bottom of the paint can contaminate the top of the paper, and I don't care. I mean, I've never cared, because these aren't anything more than studies. They're kind of experimental. They're kind of me exploring what I'm capable of doing. They're not for sale. They're not something which is precious. They're not something that I care too much about. And I've thought that for decades, years, and sometimes when people see how the paintings end up at the end of the day, a little bit more battered than they need to have done, they kind of get a bit, angry with me for not taking a bit more care with them. So yeah, kind of sorry. So I've decided that if I don't paint right to the top or bottom, when I kind of fold it round in a loop and put a clip on it, there's no paint there to smear and kind of muddy up the painting in any way. So it's actually me being clean, which is incredibly unusual for me. In fact, you might notice by this point that I've had a little 2-second break, decided I want to take off the gloves so I could, take some photographs with my phone, and I couldn't get the thumb reader to work. Completely forgot to put my gloves back on. So here I continue now, bare-handed, and within seconds, of course, I'm smeared in oil paint because I'm kind of almost unaware of it. At some point, I think I should probably try painting with my fingers anyway. It's probably going to be easier. We did talk momentarily about the idea of blue as being the distant colour and warm colours as being the foreground colour. I think at this moment you can see that in a very kind of intense, clearly abstracted way. The actual, in my eyes anyway, the cathedral, the Abbey in the distance, that's relatively realistically coloured, in the sense of it has that kind of atmospheric regression feeling, the blue, and there's a bit of cream of the stone colour. So there's a little bit of connection to that, to how it actually looks, as far as I'm prepared to do. But everything else in the foreground is kind of an abstracted colour choice. There's no light blue, there's no bright orange, there's no red in the reality of that view. And for me, that's kind of important, because it stops it feeling to me like some kind of a job of trying to match a colour of a 800-year-old piece of stone, that sense of it feeling a sort of an annoyance to try and slavishly match something that's not my point, that's not what I'm trying to do. I like the abstraction. I like how it makes the painting feel different and has a different kind of quality to it. Of course, the word different isn't very clear, is it? It's about energy. It's about abstraction that gives energy to something which is sleepy, something old, something a bit forgotten, and giving it that kind of tingle and that buzz that makes everything feel vital and breathing and alive. And of course, that's interesting for you when you're applying the paint. But I think it's interesting for the building too. If the building was kind of looking over and thinking, hello, what's he doing? I think they'd be thinking, okay, that's cool. You go on with it, I think it's respectful. It's getting to the end of the painting now, and I just wanted to point something out which I think is of interest. The acrylic, which I didn't actually highlight it enough, but there's only really a sort of an outlining and the sky in acrylic. Everything else is in oils. But when you look at the painting now, one of the things I think works particularly well is the white of the sky, because it feels very sort of casual and energetic. And that's because it's the original acrylic, which was applied without care or thought with a scraper, a kind of the scraper you would use to plaster a wall. And it has a sort of what I would call a happenstanciness, kind of, which isn't a proper word, is it? That sense of it's uncontrolled in a way that feels human, or even better than that, natural. So that's kind of one of my favourite bits of the whole painting. I can often accuse myself of being a bit of an illustrator. It's one of my fears, I suppose, and it comes across in that kind of line technique, but with moments of painterliness, like the clouds, and also I guess the reflections in the building of the window, the white reflections in the glass, that also, because none of that was intended to be there at the end. It's just an undercolor, just something to start the process. And sometimes when those things still exist at the end, there's something magical about them. There's something about a thing that was never destined to live having a starring role. I find that quite pleasing. So the big reveal, pulling off the masking tape, of course it rips the paper, because I didn't prepare myself. Not that I care particularly, but still, I did think, oh, for heaven's sake, try not to rip the paper next time in your impatience. So, painting's done. And the rain held off. I mean, lucky day. Now, I will confess, this is the third, fourth, fifth painting I've done which has a lot of vibrancy to it. And it did prompt me to go to my local art shop, Cass Art, and buy some Van Dyke Brown, which is a dark, gloomy brown. And I wonder whether I'm about to do something radically alternative next. Heaven knows if I've got the courage for that. I'll let you know next time. Thank you very much for watching.